The day our HOA president called 911 on my pregnant wife for walking too loud. I thought it was a prank, like somebody was filming a neighborhood comedy sketch. But two officers really showed up at our front door because a woman in a pressed polo shirt and perfect lipstick claimed my wife's footsteps were aggressive and a threat to community safety. My wife, Tessa, 8 months pregnant, swollen ankles, moving slower than a grocery cart with one bad wheel, stood there clutching her water bottle, trying not to cry. And I knew, right then, this wasn't just an annoying HOA. It was a bully with a badge she made up herself. We moved to Briar Glen because we wanted boring, quiet streets, decent schools, a yard big enough for a stroller and a dog one day. I work in IT risk and security, and my wife is a project manager, the kind of person who can turn a disaster into a spreadsheet that actually makes you feel better. We'd spent years saving, and when we finally got this little 2-story house with a garage, we thought we'd made it. We painted the nursery, argued about baby names, ate takeout on the floor because the couch hadn't arrived yet. Normal stuff. The first couple weeks were peaceful, until I met her. Her real name isn't important. I'm changing everything, but let's call her Marlene Kipp. I first saw Marlene standing at the edge of my lawn holding a metal ruler against my grass like she was measuring a crime scene. Not a tape measure, a literal ruler. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just looked at me like I'd shown up uninvited to her private country club. "Welcome to Briar Glen," she said, and it sounded like a warning. "We maintain standards here." Then she pointed at one blade of grass and said, "This is over the allowed height." She introduced herself like a title, Marlene Kipp, HOA president, like she'd been elected by God. Tessa came outside, being her usual warm self, smiling politely. Marlene's eyes went straight to her belly, and she gave this tight little smirk that made my stomach turn. "Stress isn't good for the baby," she said, like she was pretending to be helpful while actually making a threat. Tessa tried to laugh it off afterward. "She's just intense," she said. I told her, "No, she's hunting." We didn't learn our lesson fast enough. The first official letter came after we installed a simple handrail by the front steps, because Tessa's balance was changing and the steps got slick when it rained. The handrail wasn't ugly. It matched the house. It was common sense. 3 days later, we got a letter on fancy cardstock with an embossed logo. Unapproved exterior modification. We filled out the form. We attached a note from her doctor. We even included photos. Denied. Reason: visual inconsistency. I stared at that line so long I started laughing, because it was either laugh or throw something. Tessa grabbed my hand and said, "We're not fighting this while I'm pregnant." So we removed the rail. We told ourselves we were choosing peace. But bullies don't see peace. They see weakness. After that, it became constant. A fine because our trash bin was visible too early. A warning because our welcome mat wasn't a neutral tone. Another fine because the mailbox flag looked faded. Every letter was the same vibe. Cold, smug, and written like we were criminals. Tessa started checking the street before she went outside, like she was trying to avoid a predator. Our home started feeling less like a nest and more like a stage where someone was waiting to boo us. Then the packages started disappearing. Diapers, baby monitor, a rocking chair. We'd get a delivery notification, rush outside, and find nothing. I put up cameras, not to spy, just to protect our property. And weirdly, right after that, Marlene rearranged a decorative shrub in her yard so it blocked the view of our porch from one angle. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. Like this wasn't random. The moment it turned dangerous happened on a hot Tuesday afternoon. Tessa had been having a rough day. Back pain, swollen feet. The baby treating her bladder like a punching bag. She just wanted to walk to the mailbox and back. She moved slowly, one hand on her belly. And when she reached the end of the driveway, Marlene's sprinkler system exploded to life. But it wasn't a normal sprinkler. It was high pressure, aimed like a fire hose directly at our mailbox, directly at my wife. Tessa shrieked as the water slammed into her. She tried to step back, slipped on the wet pavement, and went down hard. I saw it through the living room window, and my body moved before my brain did. When I got to her, she was soaked, shaking, terrified, whispering, "The baby." I fell on my stomach. Across the street, the sprinklers shut off instantly. Marlene stood on her porch holding a remote, calm as a person changing the TV channel. Her husband, I'll call him Wade, stood beside her with this smug little smile. like they'd been waiting for that moment, like it was on purpose. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone calling the doctor. We went in immediately. Luckily, the baby was okay. Bruised, scared, but okay. On the drive home, Tessa was silent. Her fingers dug into my arm, and something in me shifted. The angry part of me that wanted to yell and slam doors cooled into something colder and sharper. Because this wasn't about grass or trash bins anymore. They put my wife and my unborn child at risk because they wanted control. That night we decided we were done keeping our heads down. We were going to document everything. Tessa, in full project manager mode, built a spreadsheet with columns for date, time, incident, evidence, and impact. I set up cameras properly, checked local laws, made sure we weren't crossing lines, and backed up footage automatically. We started saving every letter, every fine, every weird little interaction. And that's when our neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, an older guy 2 houses down with a yard full of goofy lawn art, shuffled over and quietly said, "You're building a case." I told him we just wanted peace. He snorted. "Peace isn't something people like her give. It's something you take back." Then he leaned closer and said, "If you want to know why she's so aggressive, follow the money." That line lived in my head for days. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't break into anything. I did what I do for a living. I looked for what was exposed. HOA financial summaries and meeting minutes were available in the homeowner portal. I downloaded everything: budgets, vendor invoices, annual reports. And after about an hour of reading, a pattern jumped off the page. Every month, the HOA paid a massive amount to a company called Evergreen Community Solutions. The descriptions were vague: beautification, enhancement, integrity services. Integrity services. Like morals were a landscaping package. The payments were huge and consistent. I checked the state business registry. Owner, Wade Kipp. Marlene's husband. I just sat there staring at the screen because suddenly everything made sense. The fines, the harassment, the obsession with control. It wasn't just ego. It was profit. Fear was their business model. Fine people into silence, bully them into compliance, and funnel HOA money into their own pocket. But suspicion wasn't enough. We needed a moment where they'd expose themselves without room to wiggle out. So we went the legal, boring route, the one bullies hate most. We asked, formally, for a review meeting and an independent audit. Marlene tried to stonewall it, but enough neighbors backed it that she couldn't refuse without looking guilty. The meeting happened in the community clubhouse on a Thursday night. Beige walls, bad coffee, folding chairs. The tension felt like a storm with no rain yet. Marlene walked in wearing a bright blazer like she was campaigning. Wade carried a leather folder and had that same smug expression, like none of us mattered. Marlene opened with, "Let's keep this respectful." And I remember thinking, respectful? You nearly knocked my pregnant wife onto her stomach with a sprinkler trap. When it was my turn, I stood up and said, calmly, "I'm not here to yell. I'm here to ask questions." I put my laptop on the table and showed the vendor payments. Then I showed the state registry with Wade's name. The room started murmuring immediately. Marlene's smile twitched. Wade's eyes sharpened. I asked, "Why is the HOA paying a company owned by the HOA president's household tens of thousands of dollars a year?" Marlene snapped. "That's an implication." I said, "It's a record." Wade jumped in. "It's approved." I nodded. "Great. Then show competitive bids. Show what services were provided. Explain why the descriptions are vague." That's when the room started to wake up. People began speaking, real stories. Fines for curtains. Fines for chalk. Warnings for garden statues. Years of quiet frustration finally turning into anger. Then Wade made the mistake of trying to flip it onto us. He pointed at me and said, "You're doing this because you got caught breaking rules." And I said, very quietly, "My wife got knocked down in front of our mailbox by sprinklers aimed at her stomach." The room went dead silent. Marlene's face drained for half a second before she tried to recover. I played the video. It wasn't Hollywood quality, but it was enough. You could see the angle, the timing. Marlene holding the remote. Wade standing beside her. You could hear Tessa scream. And the room changed instantly. That's the thing about proof, it doesn't argue. It just sits there like a weight. That night didn't end with handcuffs, but it did end with neighbors demanding an independent audit, voting to suspend Marlene's authority until it happened, and threatening legal action if she interfered. Marlene stormed out, eyes full of hate. Wade followed, jaw clenched, and I knew we weren't done. 2 days later, we got hit with their counterattack. A city inspector posted a notice claiming our renovations were non-compliant and could require us to vacate pending review. The inspector, conveniently, was related to Wade. Of course he was. Tessa broke down on the couch, hand on her belly, whispering, "We're so close to the due date." And I felt that cold clarity again. They weren't just trying to punish us. They were trying to erase us. But this time, we weren't alone. Mr. Alvarez connected us with a forensic accountant he trusted, a real pro who knew how to trace money legally. The audit uncovered more than conflict of interest. It showed money flowing out of the HOA into Wade's company, then into property purchases through shell names. The bigger play was disgusting. Pressure homeowners with fines and harassment, drive down prices, buy houses cheap, then package the neighborhood for redevelopment profit. Marlene and Wade weren't just mean. They were running a scheme. Neighbors hired an attorney together. Complaints went to the city and the state. The inspector's notice on our house got withdrawn when the city realized the reports were tied to an active fraud investigation. The same people who used to whisper in kitchens were suddenly loud, organized, and furious. The final showdown happened at the annual HOA meeting, Marlene's favorite stage. She walked up to the podium expecting fear and obedience. Instead, she got a room full of homeowners recording on their phones, a projector screen full of evidence, and a detective sitting quietly in the back. Marlene tried to shut it down, tried to call it harassment, tried to paint herself as the victim. But nobody bought it anymore. When the detective stood and calmly said, "Ma'am, we have questions about these transactions," Wade tried to leave. Two guys blocked the door, not violently, just firm. "Sit down," one of them said. "You've made all of us sit down for years." And when officers finally walked Marlene and Wade out, the silence afterward felt unreal. Like the whole neighborhood exhaled at once. 3 weeks later, Tessa gave birth to our daughter. We brought her home to a street that finally felt safe. No letters, no surprise fines, no Marlene lurking like a hall monitor with a grudge. The HOA went under emergency oversight while the investigation played out, and a volunteer committee started rewriting the rules into something sane. Mr. Alvarez got elected treasurer on the condition the budget include community morale projects, which he said absolutely required a new inflatable dinosaur. People laughed, real laughter, not nervous laughter. But here's the part that still messes with me. Even though we won, I keep thinking about how close we came to being forced out. If I didn't know how to document things, if we didn't have cameras, if we didn't find allies, would we have just packed up quietly like the others? Would Marlene still be running the neighborhood like her personal cash machine? And the other question, the one that starts arguments, how far is too far when you're defending your family? Where's the line between justice and revenge when the system moves slow and the bully lives across the street? So I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, pregnant spouse, constant harassment, corrupt people with power, what would you have done? Would you have waited for the system to catch up, even if waiting meant more risk? Would you have fought back publicly? And do you think HOAs create bullies? Or do bullies seek out HOAs because they're the perfect cover? Drop your take in the comments. Seriously, tell me where you land on right versus wrong, on fairness versus retaliation, on rules versus control. And if you've ever lived through an HOA nightmare or watched someone weaponize standards to hurt people, hit like, subscribe, and share your story below, because I promise you, you're not the only one who's seen how ugly perfect neighborhoods can get when the wrong person decides they're in charge.